trails. What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why?
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineering Watch Radio for Saturday, March 7th, 2015. Same format today. Russ is with us. I'd like to get dialogue going about 15 after. We'll go through as many questions as we can. If you call in, have your last two numbers of your call-in number in mind so that when Russ calls for that, we can get to you quickly, get through it quickly, and try to get onto more so that we can have the most constructive dialogue possible in the shortest amount of time. I wish we had more time, but we all know there's not enough hours in a day at this point. We stand back and look at the bigger picture. One can only rationally conclude our entire reality is built on lies and delusions and deceptions from top to bottom. Absolutely no denying this. Lies and Ponzi schemes, which is what industrialized civilization is, can only go on so long, and collapse then becomes inevitable. We are already descending into that collapse now. But in spite of how dark that horizon is, we have some very tangible, real, and important goals we could accomplish, starting with exposing and stopping climate engineering. We have now all mainstream news sources, not just the U.S. mainstream media, but also the Chinese news, CCTV, it's called, and RT News. And I keep these programs going in the background while I'm working at my workstation so that I can catch various points of data. All of them now have completely devoted themselves to the deception. There were points in time where even the Chinese news and RT News gave some pretty accurate data about global events. But as our situation deteriorates by the day, now those agencies are trying desperately to hide reality from their populations as well. And certainly all three of these countries are colluding in regard to climate engineering. None is disclosing anything about the other. And when we look at the lies that our reality is built on, and everything from unemployment in the United States, start with that, and the complete lie that our economy is recovering, expanding, in spite of the fact that the biosphere is dying. And by the way, nature historically has provided 75% of all global GDP for nothing. When you can send a fishing boat out in the ocean and catch fish that grew by themselves, didn't have to be farmed, didn't have to be fed, that's free resources. When you can punch a hole in the ground and have oil pop out, as it used to do in Texas. It used to take, by the way, for the record, here's a few fun facts. Around 1900, it took 1 barrel of energy to get 100 out of the ground. That's the net energy return. Now we're about 1 in 6. So it's important for people to understand that the energy remaining is much, much more difficult to get at, much more costly. So the fossil fuel fiesta is waning rapidly. But as the fish die, and energy has to be put into fish farming, extremely toxic food, by the way, I would recommend nobody eat it. As we have unemployment, the kind of lies we're fed, I'm just trying to build this card house of lies that we've all been forced to accept through much of our lives. It's crumbling now. As 300,000 or 400,000 people fall off the back end of the conveyor, who no longer get benefits and who are no longer working, or looking for work, they don't count anymore. So we're at the point now where figures are not just spun or manipulated, they're completely falsified from top to bottom. The same is true through the battle that most people on this show right now are fighting, climate engineering. Figures are completely falsified in regards to our weather and climate data. I hope that all of us continue to abandon ideology and look at hard, solid research, because even now with the planet in total meltdown, and for those living in the eastern U.S., I understand it's cold where you're at, shallow layer of cold, completely engineered cold, but it's a very small area. Again, the eastern half of the lower 48 is 1/200th of the Earth's surface area. That's not much. That's not much at all. Certainly not the whole world. Again, it would be like standing at any given location and saying, the world is flat. Anybody can see it's flat from that particular location, but you stand back further, you look at the bigger picture, and you see it's clearly not flat. So from unemployment to the completely insane notion that the human race could continue to expand perpetually and exploit resources perpetually to literally grind nature into cash indefinitely, it's the epitome of human insanity, the absolute epitome of human insanity. If nature dies, we die. That's very simple. Couldn't be more simple. Trees are dying. Insects are dying. It's tough to kill insects. In fact, what's astounding to me is I know people who have the pest man come every couple of weeks to completely saturate their yards with chemicals, as if we're not dealing with enough already. Doesn't this show the epitome of human insanity in yet one more fashion? That people, in spite of all the chemicals, were forced to face that they would invite somebody to their home to spray even more. I'm truly astounded at this. And some of these people claim to care about nature, which I don't truly understand how they go about it in that manner. But again, the trees are dying, insects are dying, oceans are dying. No news discussing any of this. And although the constant Theater and Weather Channel, constant, on the record snows which they were trying to create in the eastern U.S., this has been the goal, to create these sensationalized headlines, to try to reach the all-time snow record in Boston. I've written about this. We've talked about it. They've set a number of cold temperature records, but when they engineer a cold zone, they take perhaps, I got a little background noise, Russ, if you can hear that. They will take 1,000 temperature records from the same size area as they might take perhaps only 50 records from if it was an all-time warm. So the temperatures are skewed in every direction as this engineered cool down is forced to be stopped, because in the last few days, on March 5th, we had temperatures within 200 miles of the North Pole at 30 degrees above zero, while we had below zero temperatures in the lower 48. Does anybody think that's normal? It's absolutely not normal. So as they manipulate the jet stream, push the cold air south, chemically ice nucleate it, and create these radically cold temperatures on the ground, it's an illusion. Certainly it's cold where you're at, but I'm saying it's an illusion in the bigger picture. And it makes the overall warming far worse. Not better, but far worse. So now, as we hit all-time record lows, I want everybody to hear that, all-time record low Arctic ice extent as of March 5th this year. All the other headlines are absolute lies. We know this from the data on the ground. It's not about someone posting a fictitious chart or a graph. We know this from satellite imagery. We know this from physical observation on the ground, that the ice is absolutely retreating, and it's much, much thinner than the historical norms. In fact, in many areas, it's only 20% of the 30-year average for volume, for mass, which is the only thing that really matters. So as people, even at this late date, are still buying what the geoengineers, the military-industrial complex, and the fossil fuel industry wants them to believe, that the planet's cooling, that we're heading into an ice age, this is absolute nonsense. And the only thing creating that illusion is radical engineered cool downs. That's it. The planet's warming right now at a rate of 4 Hiroshima bombs per second. That's a mathematical fact. That's 400,000 more or less per day. That's how fast the planet is warming. When we look at ocean temperatures, nowhere is that more evident. It takes a tremendous amount of heat to heat the oceans. You put ice in a pan and put it on a stove and turn the heat on full, that water will stay cool until that ice is gone. At that point, the water heats extremely rapidly. That's what we face. The cryosphere, which is all of Earth's ice, has been an extremely resilient regulator for Earth's temperature, no matter what damage was done by human activity. the greatest of which is climate engineering. But no matter what damage was done, the ice helped to moderate the temperature, but now that ice is disappearing, and no matter how much the ice nucleated, and they're absolutely ice nucleating, we see Weather Channel every day trying to explain why there's frozen material on the ground when temperatures don't refreeze again until 5,000 to 6,000 feet up. They try to explain that every single day. They're trying to explain, I saw yesterday on Weather Channel, they were trying to explain why there's so much sublimation going on with the snow. Sublimation, again, when that frozen, chemically ice nucleated material converts from a solid to a gas without going through the liquid phase. That's what we would expect from a chemically nucleated material, and that's what we see happening. Doesn't mean it's happening in totality. Still going to be plenty of flooding when all this nucleated material melts, but it's happening a lot. A lot of sublimation is going on. So, again, it's important that we understand what's happening, why it's happening, what the bigger picture is, so that we're not running this way or that way like a leaf in the wind based on whatever headline we see. That doesn't help our credibility. It doesn't help. And the bottom line is this: if you want to keep the argument extremely simple, and I would recommend this, we know we're being sprayed. We know these programs are going on. We have the lab test to prove this material is falling on us. And it's not only contaminating every breath we take, it's making an already bad climate situation far worse, not better. I don't think there's anybody with any perspective or opinion that would argue climate engineering is making our situation better. I don't know anybody that has that knows this is going on, that has that opinion. So build your argument on something simple that's not divisive. It's not divisive, but don't build your argument on exactly what the climate engineers would want you to think and want you to say, that the planet's cooling, because it's not. It's absolutely not. So either avoid the subject or know what you're talking about. A movie I would really highly recommend to anybody and everybody. I'll go through this and then I'll get an assessment from Russ and we'll get to questions. V for Vendetta. If anybody hasn't seen that movie, I would really, really recommend that movie. I passed out, hundreds of copies of that at one point in time, and a lot of people have never heard of that, but it certainly was a movie with a very profound message, like the Matrix movies. But this one is one I would absolutely recommend, that is clearly a message from those in Hollywood. So perhaps that's one to put on a list. It's very entertaining as well, but very strong message. So, Russ, let's go to you. Have you ever seen that movie by chance?
Actually, I did. I saw it a long time ago. Yeah.
What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a very profound message. I would recommend that people see it as well. I don't remember all the details about it because it was quite a while. It's not a new movie. It's been out for what is it, like 10 years old maybe?
Oh yeah, it's not new at all. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was. It made an impression on me, though. I do remember seeing it. It's definitely worth checking out. I think people should see it.
Here's the message with that movie, with Matrix and other movies, that yes, the power structure is horribly corrupt, for lack of a better term, evil, whatever label you would like to put on them. But in order to have anything sustainable for human civilization, it's not just about removing the corruption from those in power, or removing those in power that are corrupt. It requires personal responsibility, and that's what most of our society doesn't want to accept. That's why they don't want to listen to the fact that we're being sprayed, because that might require that they not go to the golf game, that they don't spend the whole day watching a football game, but they actually do something and learn something, and put their voice into the effort to sound the alarm for the common good. And most people don't want to face that. They don't want to face it. But in fact, if they faced it with all their energy, not part of their energy, but all of it, as the biblical text goes, you can't serve two masters. You can't. You have to either be committed to the common good, which there's great solace in that, by the way, when you squarely face this issue and decide that you will commit all to the common good, to trying to carve out some sort of a future for our children. When you commit entirely to that, there is great solace. But when you have 1 foot on this stone and 1 foot on that stone, it's hard to stand up straight. You can't. So anyway, this is where our ranks and society in general has to realize that although the power structure is horrifically corrupt, we must expose them, and we must change directions. That requires personal responsibility. not just, again, yelling criticism from the sidelines or waving pom-poms, but actually getting involved and moving the ball forward each and every day, because we're all leaders. We should all be leaders wherever we're at. We can all learn how to move the ball forward effectively, polish our ability to deliver a short, concise, inarguable message to others, plant the seed, move on. And at this point in time, we're going to see radical things with the climate very, very soon. It's coming apart, and climate engineering is helping that to happen by the day. So as that happens, those people with whom you plant seeds will soon be forced to face reality, like it or not. Right, Russ? You had people around you wake up like this, right? That maybe you planted a seed 6 months ago or a year ago, and suddenly the light went on.
Absolutely. Plant seeds and don't be discouraged if they don't accept it, because the seed is planted. It will grow if people care enough. And the people are beginning to care because they're beginning to get sick, and they start asking questions. And when they start asking questions, they start finding answers. So plant the seeds. And usually one thing I find that's interesting is the more somebody resists, if they resist with passion, that means you're striking a nerve. And don't be discouraged by those people. Let that seed grow. Let it.
And once those kind of people wake up, especially those that adamantly resist, they tend to be very committed to the fight once they wake up. And this issue that we're all fighting against is like no other. It's like no other issue ever faced in human history, because this issue cannot be ignored. It's tearing apart the life support systems of the planet, poisoning every breath we take, changing our reality by the day. Can't hide from this one. Can't sweep it under the rug. Can't forget about it and buy a new car and pretend everything's all going to be happily ever after. It's not going to be that way. Happily ever after exists in doing the right things for the right reasons and knowing you can look yourself in the mirror. That's the bottom line. And if there's one thing we could accomplish, one thing, we'll get to questions after this, Russ. I would argue, and I think, Russ, you would agree, the single most important thing we could accomplish at this point in time, given everything that we face, is to expose and halt climate engineering. Would you agree with that, Russ?
I more than agree with that. Nothing, I mean, you have a choice about fluoride. You can buy water without it. You have choices about other things, vaccinations. You have choices. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice at all, and it kills and affects all life everywhere.
Everywhere, and you have to breathe. We have to breathe, and every breath we take is laden with this stuff. Sun comes up in the morning. Here, even if there's not horizon-to-horizon trails, and a lot of people need to get this through their head, those short, bright trails are absolutely spray as well. The sun's coming up through an atmosphere that looks white. It looks white, silvery white, filled with particulates. You can't see the horizon-to-horizon trails, but the atmosphere is filled with particulates and lots of short, bright trails that are the source of those particulates. So important to keep that in mind. Russ, why don't you open up the phone line? We'll start trying to knock through some questions.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. For those who want to call in, the call-in number, you can just check this out in the chat room. I'll post it, but it's 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Caller with your number that ends in 03. Who are we speaking with? Caller with your number that ends in 03. You with us?
Yes, this is Allie Larkin.
Hi, Allie.
Hi, Allie.
I had a really strange experience last evening. Excuse me. I was driving on I-5 North, just beyond the Tacoma Dome, and it was as I was watching the moon come up, I noticed up above it was a short chemtrail. And as I progressed along, the moon came right under the chemtrail, and I thought, oh my gosh, that looks just like an old bongo board. Remember what bongo boards were?
I don't actually.
Oh, it was a board put on an elongated cylinder that you stood on and tried to balance.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so as the moon rose, it looked like a bongo board. It had been a heavy chemtrail day all day, but you couldn't see. It was dark now, but there was this one chemtrail that made it look like the moon looked like a bongo board. Well, as I continued on and watched the moon rise, it's like it went right through the middle of the bongo board, the chemtrail. And I'm thinking, what? Wait a minute. You can't spray chemtrails that high?
Well, depending on your perspective on the ground, I mean, it's, that certainly, that image could be seen from a lot of people in a lot of places. So, I don't know that we could determine an altitude necessarily from that, but the bottom line, when we see spraying at night, typically, and we're having this massive high pressure again over the west, when they're trying to build high pressure. When they're trying to build high pressure, we see a lot of nighttime spraying, and that's the main time we do see it. And we see during the daytime this silvery white, with shorter trails, silvery white spraying, atmosphere full of particulates, and we do see, as I mentioned at other times, an actual increase in UV there. So got quite a bit of background noise still, Russ. I don't know if if everybody can be careful to keep the background noise down, then other listeners can hear clearly. So in any event, we are seeing spraying at night sometimes over the West Coast, and that's when we typically see it, when they're trying to actually build the heat, build the high pressure, and we're expecting tremendous heat. In fact, in Northern California, we're supposed to be pushing perhaps 90 degrees in a few days. Intensely warm, no moisture on the horizon. We're headed for total cataclysm here, and this is completely a result of geoengineering. But thanks for bringing up the night spraying, and I hope that others can watch for that in their area. And it's also important to remember that if you have a canopy already over you, many people think that there's been nothing going on. There's generally more going on over existing canopy than there is over the horizon trails on an otherwise clear day. So they leave nothing untouched. Let's say that. They leave nothing untouched. The geoengineers taint everything. But thanks for pointing that out to us, Allie.
Well, yeah, because, that's what I thought. Am I seeing an optical illusion? But I'm seeing that the color of the chemtrail in front of the moon is darker than all the rest of it.
Yeah, well, again, you have lighting variances there as it would cross across that backdrop. But we certainly, again, they're leaving nothing untouched at this point. I believe the unraveling is picking up momentum by the day. The rebound of warmth after this constant parade of engineered cold, for the reasons I stated earlier, is going to be profound and strong, and the attempt for them to cool down certain regions is going to be harder and harder as time goes by. So anyway, we should all continue to sound the alarm as best we can. Thanks, Allie. We'll try to grab another one here if you don't mind.
Sure.
Great, Allie. Thanks so much for calling. Caller with your number that ends in 50. Who are we speaking with?
Alan Davis.
Hey, Alan. How are you?
Fine. How are you? I want to let you know that I've got a response from the State Aeronautics Division for their rules and their. They sent me it. One of the things they sent me was it's called the policy element. It's a document. Anybody can get this online. California Aviation System Plan policy element. And I found some very interesting things.
You're a little broken up. If you can speak into the phone a little clearer, we can hear you better.
What I got from the Aeronautics Division in my Public Records Act request recently, it's called the policy element, and it's a document anyone can get online. They directed me to it. And
can you post that online for us? I mean, because a lot of people might not know exactly where to look. I mean, if you can post that.
Yeah, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to forward emails of it. It's in a PDF, and then I will see about posting. I haven't really posted a lot of stuff, so I'm going to have to go and look and see how I can do that. But
if you just post a link, just a link to that way people can access the PDF. If you post a link,
do that. That's fine. I'll do that. I'll do it on Facebook and wherever I can, whatever blogs yours, and I'll also send it by email to some people. And what it's, I want to read just a piece of this. The executive summary, the policy element. PE is the primary document that explains and guides the business of the Division of Aeronautics that is housed in the California Department of Transportation. The division's primary duties and functions are the State Aeronautics Act. Originally, the State Aeronautics Commission Act of 1947 and published in the California Public Utilities Code, Section 21001, et cetera. The PE is one of multiple elements that comprise the larger California Aviation System Plan. The means by which continuous aviation system planning is conducted by the state. CASP elements are revised on approximately a 5-year cycle, with the last policy element update published in 2006. Well, this is 2011, so the next update and revision of their policy is next year.
Relate this to climate engineering, if you would, Alice. Again, this might be a lot of detail like that. It might be hard, as we discussed before, for people to retain on air. If you can, the best thing to do is to summarize and point out the parts that are relevant to climate engineering and put those posts up, because we certainly need a lot of detailed data on air right now is difficult for people to retain or to be able to assimilate. So I would suggest, again, summarizing the data you find and put the posts up. That would be most helpful.
What I wanted to tell you is that we have 2016, we have 1 year we can file an appeal or an administrative challenge on their policy on this. It happens every 5 years.
Okay, again, Alan, I appreciate what you're doing, but for us to go into a big rabbit hole like this right now on air, I want to get to as many calls as I can. And with all due respect to you, if you can summarize that and give us some instruction as to what to do, I think it would be much more productive. I'm not trying to negate what your efforts are at all, but it would be much more productive, I think, if we could get that down and your assessment down and why it's relevant and what steps we should take, I think would be much more digestible for people if it was down in black and white where they can see it in an email. I'm afraid if we go too far into this on air right now, we'll miss a lot of callers, and it won't be clear unless they see it written down. So if you can do that for us, Alan, that would be great, and get that to us, and we'll in a form we can post, and we'll get at that, okay?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Okay, Alan, thank you so much for calling. Caller with your number that ends in 80. Who are we speaking with?
Hey guys, what's happening? This is Eddie in New Mexico again.
Hi, Eddie.
How are you, Dane, Russ? How you guys doing?
Good, how are you? What's going on down there?
Just fine. Well, to be quite honest with you, in the past 2 weeks, it's been quite strange here in northwest New Mexico. They haven't been spraying. You know, it's been about 2 weeks since they've been heavily spraying, and it's been very strange because you'll still see you'll still see planes really high up in the ionosphere, but you know what they're releasing is only staying for about 30 seconds, and then it kind of goes away. So it kind of leaves like a little silvery haze through the sky, and it's very dirty and very ugly. But you know, I'm not seeing the big miles long trails right now, and I'm just wondering if that's going on in California as well, or are they still spraying relentlessly up there?
Well, again, it's important to remember that the horizon-to-horizon trails are only the tip of the iceberg. Again, and they wouldn't be up in the ionosphere, but they certainly all the spraying we see takes place generally in the troposphere, which would extend up to about 40,000 feet. Then you have tropopause, then you have stratosphere. There may be some occurring in some layers of the stratosphere, but generally it takes place in the troposphere. But the bottom line is, though, this is becoming more and more common. The shorter, bright trails, it's much less obvious to people. You see the little cobweb clouds floating around. The sky gets very whitish, silvery white.
Right, yeah.
And now, Eddie, when it's that kind of sky, does the sun still feel quite intense?
Oh, absolutely. I was going to mention that as well. I mean, when I'm outside walking with my dogs or playing with them, I mean, there's just an immense heat on my face, on my back. I mean, it is very intense. You know what I mean? And especially for the months of January and February, I would tell my girlfriend, Megan, I mean, can you believe this heat coming through when this is supposed to be our coldest winter months, you know?
It's incredibly warm. And again, when you saturate the atmosphere with the particulates, when they're being moved back and forth because they're being microwaved, there appears to actually be a lens effect as they're trying to create high pressure, and we do see higher UV ratings at this point. And whatever's happening above that, and again, the ionosphere from 30 plus miles up to as much as 1,000 kilometers up, about 600 miles up. That's a huge section that's affected by the ionosphere heaters and even areas of the lower layers of the atmosphere. So we can only guess at the total directions from which they are completely altering, decimating, destroying the atmosphere. But what we see here, to answer your question, yes, we see a lot of that type of spraying of late, especially the cobweb clouds, the silvery white sky. UV is very intense. It's very dry. You notice that too, Eddie? It's really dry when that kind of spraying is going on?
Completely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we had a completely engineered storm here for the past week, I would say. It was trying to snow, but it was more like sleet and rain than it was anything else, you know, and compared to how it was growing up here in the 90s, I mean, we actually used to have moisture here, you know, big snowstorms that would roll through, and it's not the same. It hasn't been close to the same for a long time, and, just being aware of it all, thanks to you and Russ and what you guys have been doing, it's just really helped Megan and I understand the world around us a little better and to try to protect ourselves the best we can, you know?
The awareness is coming from all of us working together, and doesn't that make you angry to not have natural weather anymore? I mean, it makes me angry.
It's discouraging. It's discouraging to be a person who used to love, and don't get me wrong, I still love looking at the sky, taking pictures of sunsets, adoring the sun, the moon, the clouds, the stars, and just to see what's been happening over the past decade is just appalling. As a human being, just a part of this entire equation, you know what I mean?
I do, and it should make us angry that there's so many people that are so willing to contribute to the lie, to adamantly lie, to protect their paychecks and pensions. And these people must be held accountable. In fact, and peacefully, that's all I'm saying, peacefully, they should be highlighted, emailed, send them to the disinformation directory. We can, if it's somebody of profound importance, we can do a post on them there. But these people should be given notice that they should consider, when the population truly wakes up to this issue, that population will hold them accountable for their part in lying. And I noticed this morning that the Weather Channel actually was sent to me by Corey Gunnels. Thank you, Corey. That Weather Channel is now having to talk about the fact that we are frying in the West, absolutely frying. In fact, many cities, their record warm winter, breaking last year's record warm winter, even warmer now. It's astoundingly hot here. And yet all they do is focus on these little engineered cool-down areas. And at this point, the climate engineering machine is in all-out mode. People are getting sick everywhere. How are you feeling respiratorily, Eddie?
Well, me personally, Megan and I both, we are not affected as others are with that part of the equation. You know, we don't have the respiratory illness. We're not sick, but we are, you know, very nervous moving into the future, watching this happen consistently, not just, you know, week to week, you know, take some time off, but day to day this is happening, whether they're doing the big horizon to horizon trails or not. Like I said, we're seeing the little silvery ones with the cobwebs, and it's just, it's very unnerving to think that we have, you know, to breathe it in, we have to let it accumulate in the environment, in our food, in our water. And it's just, you know, the more we do it, the faster and the more accelerated this is going to break apart. And like you said, man, I mean, it's very noticeable here in New Mexico. I mean, there's not a cloud of moisture in the sky as I look up to the sky today. There's nothing in the sky, and you know, it's just not normal. You know, it's completely just a different reality than when I was growing up in the 90s. You know,
that's the second good point you brought up, Eddie, that initially, again, those sort of skies that we see a lot in the West, the silvery white, still heavily sprayed, still lots of particulates, but the cobwebby clouds, not so much the horizon to horizon. Important for people to remember that's still massive spraying and RF frequency microwaving the atmosphere going on. And two is what you just said. This equation is very, very non-linear. Super important for people to remember that. The speed at which the biosphere is imploding is blinding. I think this year we're going to see things that few can yet imagine. So we'll see if that happens. But thanks for bringing up those points, Eddie, and thanks for the update from down under. Russ, you got questions for Eddie?
Eddie, you know, I appreciate what Eddie is doing, and you know, thank you for all of that. I will tell you that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you know, and I will say that, you know, we talk about how pervasive this is, and I just want to know, as someone who actually smells and tastes this, I've been up and down the East Coast a number of times, driving and flying, and it's the entire way. It's not like you're going to escape this anywhere in the United States. This is affecting everybody everywhere. But thank you, Eddie, so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Eddie. Thank you.
Hey, you got it, boys. I'll keep you updated. I'll call you back soon, okay? You guys have a good day.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Keep it up. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, buddy.
All right, caller with your number that ends in 20. Those are the last two digits of your phone number. Who are we speaking with?
Hello, this is Barry calling.
Texas.
Okay,
I'm calling.
background is that? I think you have a background. Oh, hopefully that went off right now. Try it again.
Okay, is this?
This is Barry calling from Los Angeles.
Hi, Barry.
Hi, I'm actually with Los Angeles Skywatch, and I know, Russ, that Paulette spoke to you this week, and you posted our event that we're going to be hosting tonight in Marina del Rey. And we're going to be showing Look Up by George Barnes, narrated by actor William Baldwin. And that's going to be tonight at 7 p.m. at the Sivananda Yoga Center. And that's at 13325 Beach Avenue, Marina del Rey. And if you'd like to get directions, just go to losangelesskywatch.org and click on Calendar of Events up at the top menu, and you can see this event.
My thanks to you and
Barry,
everybody else who helped work on that, Barry. That's you guys have accomplished a lot getting that done. And George Barnes, I know, he's put a lot into this, a lot of effort, a lot of personal resources. George is just as frustrated as the rest of us with the people in his industry, for example, the film industry, that see this stuff every day and yet are unwilling to really face it because they feel maybe it's a bad career decision or it might make them stand out or be exposed to a little ridicule. So everybody just pretends that nothing's going on while the ship goes to the bottom. So I know George appreciates what you guys have done, and he's done his best with the resources he had. And thanks for everything you guys have accomplished there, Barry.
You're very welcome. And if for anybody who lives in the Los Angeles area, we have meetings on a monthly basis in Santa Monica. And if you go to our web page, losangelesskywatch.org, and you can sign up for our mailing list and be informed about our meetings.
And another event as well, Barry, for people in your area, the Cal Jam event, which we did some posting on. Dr. Billy DeMoss, who has organized that, does consider climate engineering to be the most important issue. He's made that clear to me in multiple conversations, and rationally I think we should consider it the most important issue for all the reasons we've already discussed. So that's another event where people can help to sound the alarm. There's information about that online. So again, the more spot fires we start, the faster we'll have this issue to the light of day. So thanks for everything you've done, Barry.
You're very welcome, and thank you, Dane.
Have a great day.
All right, Barry, thank you. And by the way, I posted
Thanks,
a link to Barry's event on the chat room, and I also have it at the top of the Global Skywatch Facebook group. I took it down just for the duration of the show, but I'll have it back up right afterward to get as much exposure. So everybody, please share that if you can. Caller with your number that ends in 64. Who are we speaking with?
Wes from Eastport. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm sorry, it's Wes or Les?
Wes.
Wes, hi Wes, thanks for calling.
Hey, listen, last Saturday, I live roughly about 2 miles from the Atlanta airport, right? Last Saturday, I looked up in the sky from 9 o'clock to about 5 o'clock. It was like a checkerboard, right? Today, there was nothing. But the reason why I'm calling, I'll be quick about this. I recall a 1978 experiment they did with rats or mice, where they gave 100 rats, lead salt, another 100 rats, mercury salt, right? By themselves, the rats was dying like 1 out of every 100. When they put them together, what do you call it? Synergistics, they put them together, and the rats...
It's called, synergistic toxicity is what it's called.
Okay. Why aren't we talking about that concern? I mean, especially with the GMOs, the vaccines, and all this area spreading. They're trying to kill us. That's what I think it is.
Well, again, the synergistic toxicity is real. We do talk about it a lot.
Okay, I don't listen a lot, so I apologize.
But your point is valid, and there's so many different metals now, Wes, that there's no study on the overall synergistic toxicity. There would be no way to really accurately do such study. It's so immense. So even though, yes, this is the net effect, no matter how you slice it, no matter what prism you look through or what how you want to try to categorize the agendas going on, the end result is the same no matter what. This is absolutely positively not just killing us, but everything else on the planet as well. But I would suggest, though, as a lead punch, when you're trying to introduce this subject to others, it's much more. It's important not to lead with that, because it's not the whole truth, even though it's the net result. And I don't argue with you at all about that. Right. People simply can't handle anything like that. But if you introduce with the fact that These programs are going on to manipulate the climate for purposes of power and control, because it is power and control no matter what. It's highly toxic. It's building up in all of us. Then people can palate that. They can accept that, and they'll find their way further into the rabbit hole. Maybe they'll come to the conclusion, as many of us have, that eugenics may be a part of these programs as well. I mean, it's the net result, no matter how you slice it. I mean, it is eugenics, which is a culling of life on Earth. It ends up being omnicide. For those who don't know what omnicide, it's a willful destruction of all life. So your point is valid, Wes. It's absolutely valid, and that's the common ground that everyone can agree on, that we are breathing what they are spraying. It's extremely toxic. It will kill us if it goes on, correct? Period.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you for getting my call. One other thing I'll say is I want to make sure that people recognize this is not a black and white issue. This is a life on Earth issue. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Wes. Thanks for calling.
Yes, sir. You have a good day.
You too, my friend.
Yeah, Wes, thank you. Good to hear from you. Very good points as well. We have another caller with your number that ends in 20. Are you with us?
I am. Bob Pruden calling from Orange, Texas today. How are y'all, gentlemen?
Hey, Bob. How are you?
Hi, Bob.
I got a couple of stupid questions for you, Dane.
No such thing. No such thing, Bob.
Well, it seems stupid to me. It's just something I've been thinking about. When we talk about methane and the heating of the Earth and the methane releases in the Arctic that are going on right now, was there a time, and I believe I was taught that there was a time in Earth's past history when the Arctic was tropical and dinosaurs were on the Earth?
You're correct.
So that would mean, in my mind, that whatever methane was to be released in the Arctic would have been in the atmosphere at that time. Am I correct or incorrect, Dane?
Not necessarily, because as you had eras in Earth's history that were very lush, with very high oxygen content, and for very, very extended periods of time, that's what allowed a lot of that biomass to build up in the first place. That's now stored in deposits like methane hydrate and methane clathrate. So depending on the era you're speaking about, it's not necessarily the case. Let me take this further, because your question is very valid. If we go back 55 million years to the Pedum event, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, mass extinction on planet Earth, methane expulsion, about 90% aquatic extinction, about 70% terrestrial extinction, and the planet did eventually regulate that, but there was about a 10 to 20 million year equilibrium period. If we go back to more recent era, the Pliocene epoch, from about 3 million to 5 million years ago, we had CO2 content that was perhaps 25% higher than today, but it got to that point at a much, much, much slower rate, perhaps 100 or 200 or 300 times slower rate than today. So the planet's systems of equilibrium cannot respond. So what's happening now is completely unprecedented in Earth's history, completely. And the conditions are different in that those longer periods you mentioned before, we had very extended periods of thriving, lush life on Earth. That biomass has built up. You also have mantle methane, another animal completely. So right now, we are in uncharted territory. But that being said, I want to say this about the dire warnings coming from, for example, AMEG on the methane issue. AMEG's data from the ground, this is the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, is accurate in many ways, because we can see that from multiple sources, from multiple angles. We can see it from footage on the ground, the ice extent. There's just too many ways to verify that data. It is accurate. It isn't that bad. We are at record low Arctic ice as of March 4th. That can fluctuate because it's right on the borderline right now. But the AMEG group is patently denying climate engineering, which makes, in some senses, everything they say invalid in a certain light, because they're not admitting to what is mathematically the single greatest climate influencing factor of all right now. It's not the only source of damage, and people in our movement who say this are simply not looking at the truth. Any form of human activity is geoengineering. Putting 100 million tons of CO2 in the atmosphere every single day is geoengineering. Cutting down forests is geoengineering. You can't eliminate those. Too many people are trying to, and when they do that, they cost our cause credibility. You can't ignore other factors, or your equation is not valid. And the same is true with the Arctic and Methane Emergency Group. When they ignore climate engineering that's been going on for 65 years, they are having an illegitimate discussion about the climate. And as dire as their predictions are, Guy McPherson and the AMA Group, they do not know, none of us know, how aggressively the planet will respond if it's allowed to. And the planet may, in fact, and certainly there's much more to this equation that we do not know. So as dire as the situation looks, as dire as some of the predictions are, your question about, if I'm getting at this in the right manner, if the planet survived before, could it survive now? We really don't know. It looks bad now. It looks worse than any other era before, but we don't know, and we won't know. We won't know unless or until we can stop climate engineering, and that's why that should be absolute priority number one for all of us. We will not know if the planet can somehow survive what we've done to it unless we expose and stop climate engineering. Industrial civilization in its current form will collapse after that. So, again, I know that was a long explanation, Bob, but does that get at some of what you're asking?
Well, it does. It seems like I've run across plans that our oil people have been wanting to defrost the Arctic for years. As far back as the 1800s, they've made plans to defrost the Arctic to get to the oil, from what I understand. V for Vendetta is a great movie too. Let's
carry that. If we could, let's carry that point a little further, though.
Okay.
Yes, you've always had disaster capitalists. I don't argue that. Is there people that, as the ship is going down, want to fill their pockets with loot? Of course. Does that
they're
mean
doing it right now?
That's right. I'm not denying that. But does that mean that that is the intent? And I would argue this. When we look at the extent charts, like 2007 when the ice almost crashed, and the massive climate engineering ramping up that occurred then, and the ice then miraculously, even to the surprise of all the climate scientists, rebounded, the surface area, not the mass, rebounded. And geoengineering is the cause of that rebound, with radical ice nucleation blocking the sun. It has a temporary cooling effect. It does. So if they were intentionally trying to melt that ice, it would be gone. It would be long gone. So although there's people trying to capitalize off of that, and there always will be, off any disaster, there's always disaster capitalists, right? But that doesn't mean that that is the actual intent of those with the programs. And good or benevolent in these programs, there's not. And what they're doing in the end overall is having an overall net effect of melting the whole cryosphere, because the short-term cooling events come at the cost of a worsened overall warming. But when those say that that's the intent to melt off the Arctic, if you want to lose credibility in our cause, that's the way to do it. Because anybody in the climate science community, military-industrial complex, and I've spoken to some of these people, even though they're wrong about what they believe what they're doing is for the common good. They've been trained to believe this. And if anybody comes in with the intent that they're specifically trying to melt things off, when we have engineered snowstorms everywhere, this rampant push for artificial chemical ice nucleation to refreeze the Great Lakes, it's all chemical nucleated. You don't have ice floating around in the Great Lakes last year at the start of June with record warm temperatures, almost 90, with ice on the lake still. This is not natural ice. If they were trying to melt everything off, we wouldn't see that. So again, we have to sift the baby from the bathwater. There are disaster capitalists, as you mentioned, absolutely. People who want to capitalize off the melted Arctic, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that that's the overall bigger picture. So we need to be careful about what we say and the research we do and the conclusions we have. That's all. You need to look at the whole picture.
But what they're doing, like out in the Pacific, right, is pulling that warm air off of the Pacific Ocean and pushing it up into the Arctic. It seems like they're defeating each other's purpose if that's what's happening. If they're pulling that warm air up from the Pacific into the Arctic and then recooling it with chemical ice nucleation or whatever techniques they might be using, then to drop it back down, it seems like a completely mad, vicious cycle that they've gotten themselves into.
Well, it is, but let's carry that further. What else have they done by putting that record high pressure over California? They have suppressed the El Nino from developing since 2007. They've suppressed it again and again and again and again. You have the whole climate science community scratching their heads, not being able to figure out why hasn't the atmosphere responded to the Kelvin wave when it forms. That's the beginning of the El Nino. The strongest Kelvin waves ever have been suppressed because they are able to push that heat back into the ocean. So that stops the El Nino, and overall, that helps them to hide some of the warming by hiding it in the oceans. Yes, they push the warmth into Alaska. Yes, it warms Alaska, but what do they cover, Bob? They don't cover the fact that it was 30 degrees above normal 200 miles from the Arctic 2 days ago. What do they cover? The record cold, record cold, record cold, record cold. That's all they talk about. So, again, all these aspects have to be looked at. So when they push the warm air north, yes, it has an overall warming effect. I've stated this again and again, but what do they cover? The cool downs, because they want a certain perception in the population. They want the division, the confusion. They've suppressed the El Nino. That helps to hide the heat in the oceans. You have to look at the bigger picture. I agree completely.
Well, just one other quick point. If Greenland and the Arctic was to completely melt, Dane, what is your? I get a lot of different numbers out there. What would the sea level rise be?
You have about, depending on the study, about 21 to 24 feet of sea level rise. If all of Greenland's ice was gone, you have glacial rebound, which means the whole landmass of Greenland would pop out of the water to a significant degree. In in Antarctica, you have about 197 feet of sea level rise. When that entirely melts at some point, the rest of the Earth's glaciers about 10 to 15 feet, about 240 feet total, Bob.
So, well, I understand Antarctica comprises about 90% of the melted or the frozen water on the planet. Is that correct?
Yes, that's very close. Again, about close to 200 feet there, and another 35 to 40 feet, and the rest of the globe's glaciers, depending on, including Greenland, depending on the study. Because the sea ice doesn't raise anything. People think if the Arctic melts, it's going to raise sea level. Not really the case with the Arctic, with sea ice, because again, it's the ice cube in the glass of water. It melts, right, but the water in the glass doesn't overflow. It's already being displaced. Right. So, but about 240 total, Bob.
Fantastic. Hey, y'all are doing a great job. Love watching, listening to the show, and y'all get on to the next caller. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
Great. Thank you for the call, Bob. Caller with your number that ends in 81. How are you? Who are we speaking?
Good, thanks. It's Casey. I'm wondering if you can comment on a story from a couple of weeks ago. It was on Zero Hedge and a few other places. A professor of environmental science at Rutgers received a call from some CIA contractor, supposedly, asking if there was weather manipulation going on, would they be able to detect it? And apparently this call happened in 2011, but they just released a story a couple of weeks ago. And I noticed it was coincidental with the NSA report coming out recommending geoengineering, and one of the sponsors of that report was, of course, the intelligence community. I hear what you're saying, Dane, about RT and how much they're involved, but all of this was timed with this smear campaign against Putin, and I just, fingers crossed, that there might be some break in the power structure between the collapse of the currency in the EU and the NATO alliance being challenged in Ukraine, that it might allow for some courageous country to break the stranglehold on this and break out and start opening this up a bit.
Well, all these events are connected, as you obviously know, and the kind of calls with Robach, I've met him some years back, and he's certainly not telling the truth either about the climate engineering reality. So we see certain stories that appear to be smoke and mirrors, like the CIA contributing $600,000 for a study on climate engineering, and we see various little bits and pieces they throw out. But again, as in an overall context, as the walls close in, as collapse is imminent, and it is imminent in its current form, this paradigm won't continue, and climate engineering will be impossible to hide for much longer. So all these events are coming together at once, converging catastrophes, if you will. That's what we face right now. So how those dominoes will fall is anyone's guess. But again, a lot of smaller stories are, as you mentioned, are going to continue to come out, and let's hope at some point that some country does stand up and sound the alarm all the way around, because right now we have just a dam of silence that has to be broken down.
I agree. Just one last comment. I thought that this, as you say, they can't hide it any longer, and it seems like they're trying to get ahead of the story by putting it out there, but trying to blame Russia, and that whenever they are caught doing will just be in a response and self-defense.
That's exactly what they're doing. In fact, I'm trying to think of his name. There's a researcher who's covering this very well in like hour-long documentaries with a lot of data that, the sort of propaganda being put up right now to create this the scapegoat, if you will. But that's exactly what's going on. And again, with that issue, just like with the climate, we have a lot of people who believe things. We shouldn't stand on beliefs. We should stand on conclusions built on fact. Whether we're talking about the climate and the state of the climate or what's happening in Ukraine or anywhere else, beliefs should be built on facts, not ideology, period. And we have a lot of people in our own movement, again, that are stuck in belief systems or beliefs that feel good, but are not building their conclusions on hard facts. So if we're to be different from those in general society who have chosen to believe that there's no spraying going on because believing that feels good, if we behave in the same manner, we're no different from them. We have to build our conclusions on facts, period. Russ, what do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. We do have to build our conclusions on facts. And this is one thing that really gets under my skin, is that we have a society today that is facilitated. They have been facilitated since childhood to live in a fantasy, to not deal with facts. And that is the problem. If people dealt with reality, built their belief systems on facts, stuff like this would never get off the ground.
It wouldn't get off the ground. And what's perplexing right now, especially in the anti-climate engineering community, is that these completely engineered events are, by some people, looked at as just a naturally changing climate. And that's, how can you look at something that's completely manipulated and engineered as being natural in any sense? And when we have an example right now of our planet and all the damage that's been done from every source, including climate engineering, to say that there's anything natural about that, again, an example I've used before, would be like shooting someone 5 times in the back of the head and saying, people die. It's natural. Nothing natural about that kind of death. Nothing natural about what's happening on the planet right now. And to say that it's in any way natural is simply untrue. And with the Ukraine situation, again, to weave that back into climate engineering and everything else, I would connect that situation right with climate engineering, in that as it becomes impossible to hide climate engineering, which will overturn the paradigm on the planet once the population finds out, events like Ukraine are part of the tools that will be used to perhaps create global conflict, to keep people from really, or to try to keep people from rising up and taking a stand by immersing everyone in a global conflict. So again, it's up to us, all of us, to get up to speed, to focus on the task at hand, to make our voice effective with credible data, passing that out, contacting everybody in our circles. Every single day matters now, every day.
Well, thank you both. You guys are a unifying force.
Thank you. It's all of us together. Again, it's all of us together that matters. Russ, final rundown on your take of what's happening up your way and what we should all be doing right now.
Well, like so often, we've got cold and snow in the east, and we've got heat wave in the west, and that's what I'm seeing, just like the maps. I did paste a link to the map that people can see in the chat room where you're seeing all the manipulation going on. I did want to throw in also, we're down to our last 60 seconds here, is that V for Vendetta and The Matrix are both written and produced by the Wachowski brothers.
That makes sense. That makes complete sense. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting how that correlates. But Dane, we got a few seconds left here. I just want to encourage everybody to get out and do something. Tell the public. I feel like we're still in the stage where we've got to wake the public up. We need numbers.
You can't fight an army, or you can't fight a battle without an army, excuse me, and we need to raise that army, and that involves all of us moving the ball forward each and every day, wherever we're at. All of us can be leaders in this fight. We all must be. Absolutely. For the callers we didn't get to, I apologize. We had a lot of people calling in, but we will get to you next week. Please call in and join us. This is GeoEngineering Watch Radio. We're here every Saturday at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time at ucy.tv/GW. This is Russ Tanner on behalf of GeoEngineering Watch Radio and Dane Wigington. We will see you next week. Take care. Lines appear, them, there is natural.
to Anti-Media Radio. Your host, Nick Burnaby, here on UCY.tv.